Okay, in chapter 11, we're going to look at property crimes. So let's start with burglary. We talked about robbery in chapter 10. Robbery is a personal crime and a property crime. Burglary is a property crime, so it involves the unlawful entry into a structure, that could be a business, a residence, some other type of building, with the intent to commit a felony while inside. Usually that's a theft, but it can be any felony. Force is also not a requirement. And over your lifetime, 72% of households will be burglarized. So the lifetime risk of burglary is high, though in any given year it's actually pretty low. Now, most burglaries do involve forcible entry, and most residential burglaries occur during the day, because that's when people are unlikely to be home. Now, the consequences for a victim can be profound. When someone breaks into our home, it feels very personal, and it can produce high levels of fear and apprehension. Commercial burglary losses can really affect small, less stable businesses. Now, here we can see some different types of burglary. Attempted forcible entry, where force is used. Attempted unlawful entry, no force is used. Maybe you jiggle the doorknob to see if it's open. Completed forcible, force is used to successfully gain entry. Completed unlawful, no force is used, but the residence is entered by someone who has no legal right to be there. Maybe going through an open window. And then a completed burglary includes both completed forcible entries and completed unlawful entries. Again, it doesn't actually have to involve any stolen property. You just have to have the intent to commit a felony while you're there. Now, burglary rates are higher in large metropolitan areas and in the South. Some of this is due to lifestyle theory and routine activities theories, which we talked about in the last chapter on theory. And how our lifestyles differ and how our routine activities differ really can help play a role in whether or not we become a victim of burglary. Now, in terms of residential burglary, Cohen and Cantor found that regardless of someone's race, both the highest income and lowest income neighborhoods, both within and outside the central city, have the highest rate of victimization. Now, high-income households are targeted because they tend to have items of particularly high value, and low-income households might be targeted for ease of access. Now, household burglaries have decreased in general, but burglaries involving the theft of an electronic device or household appliance have increased. Most household burglaries involve some type of economic loss. That could be lost property, including cash, and time lost from work trying to deal with the burglary. Now, another issue is stability of residence. Property crimes like burglary have a greater effect on the decision to move than violent crimes. Now, larceny is theft. It's the unlawful taking and carrying away of the property of someone else with the intent to deprive them of it. It's the most frequently occurring property crime, and the largest category is theft from motor vehicles, when someone steals something out of someone's car. Larceny does not involve the use of force or a means of illegal entry. Now you can see here shoplifting from motor vehicles, from buildings, wide variety of types of larcenies, pickpocketing. Now, retail theft includes both shoplifting and what is sometimes called shrinkage, which is theft by store employees. Most employees who steal cash or merchandise are short-term workers, and most retailers consider that internal theft to be a bigger problem than shoplifting. Now, a lot of the efforts to combat shoplifting involve technology, but that can also impact sales, making it more difficult for people to shop. So who shoplifts? Juveniles are overrepresented in self-report data, and most offending patterns are sporadic. The early finding that most shoplifters are female has been challenged in recent research, and the majority of youth report shoplifting. And there's also a maturing out pattern for this. So as we get older, we tend to shy away from this type of criminal behavior. Now, here's something interesting. Your book talks about flash mobs and how they can be used to commit crime. So flash mobs are purposeful crowds of people. They're usually brought together, kind of last minute via social media. Sometimes you've seen these on TV. It's a bunch of people. They show up somewhere and they do a dance. But they can also involve organized criminal activity. So flash mobs can be used to mask larcenies that are happening. The best steps that stores can take to deal with this is to document the larceny through videos and security footage and quickly report that crime to local law enforcement. Now, identity theft is the misuse of another person's personal information to commit fraud. Most people become a victim of this to some degree or another. You may get an email or a letter in the mail that your bank card's been compromised in some way. Now, there's two main categories. Fraud and identity theft related to someone's existing accounts or when people open new accounts in your name. So existing account fraud is where someone gets information about your open accounts, credit cards, bank cards, whatever. This is less costly, but it's more prevalent. Now, new account fraud is where someone uses your personal information to open up new accounts. And you're probably not even aware of this until you either hear from a collection agency or you check your credit report and there's information on there for accounts you don't know about. This is much harder to fight and imposes greater hardships and costs on victims. Now, the costs of identity theft include, obviously, the direct losses, but also costs to businesses for fraud prevention and costs to victims, such as the cost of dealing with civil litigation or going into court to try to get your money back. Now, people's fears of becoming identity theft victims can also harm the digital economy. There are some people who refuse to shop online because they're worried about their information being stolen. Now, several laws have been put into place to try to deal with this. So, for instance, identity theft is a federal crime. In 2004, they increased the sentences for criminals that were using stolen card numbers and other personal data to commit crime. Now, the Bureau of Justice Statistics defines identity theft in a couple of ways. One is the unauthorized use or attempted use of someone's existing credit cards, the unauthorized use or attempted use of other existing accounts, and the misuse of personal information to obtain new accounts. Now, about 7% of U.S. residents aged 16 and older were victims of identity theft in 2012, and most of that involves the misuse of existing credit cards or bank cards. About 1 in 6 households that were victimized had to pay higher interest rates as a result, and about 1 in 9 were denied either like phone service or utility services in their home. Now, you can see here, and you can look at this in more detail in your book, that there's different ways people find out. You might be contacted. Your bank might say, this activity looks suspicious and ask you to confirm it. You might notice money missing from your account. Lots of different ways you can become aware of this. So who are identity thieves? They're difficult to classify. They often have no prior criminal background, and many may have pre-existing relationships with victims. There is an increased involvement of foreign organized criminal groups in computer and internet-related identity theft, and we're starting to see more sophistication and more specialization in this arena. Now, motor vehicle theft is the theft or attempted theft of a motor vehicle. That's not just a car. It can mean a bus, a motorcycle, a snowmobile. But cars are obviously the most common type of vehicle stolen. And this violates a victim beyond financial loss. Especially here in America, we tend to feel more personal relationships with our cars. Now, about 81% of all motor vehicle thefts are reported to the police. And this happens because our insurance won't pay out without a police report. Now, the reporting rate is obviously higher for completed versus attempted thefts. And that reporting rate also increases with household income level. About 62% of stolen cars are recovery, but it doesn't mean they're in drivable condition. And people steal cars for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they just want to take it for a ride. It might be used in a crime, or it might be stripped for its parts. Cars are much more valuable in terms of their parts. It's worth about 3 times as much for your parts. So some parts are worth a lot on the illegal market, and they can be sold even by inexperienced thieves. It's also much harder to find stolen parts than it is to find an entire stolen car. Now, in 1984, a law went into place that Your VIN, your vehicle identification number, is located generally in at least 3 places in your car. So one is generally on the inside of the driver's side door. There's one right up in the front of your dashboard. And then there's usually a couple that are hidden and not, the public isn't aware of them. That helps people identify cars later on if they've been recovered. Now, joyriding is when we steal a car just for the hell of it. Take it for a ride. It's usually committed by teenagers, and it doesn't really have any extrinsic value. These cars are often recovered, either abandoned or they've been crashed. And the people who steal them might often know the vehicle's owners. Now, professional thefts are the most costly and most serious. And they're not as common, though. So these types of thieves operate in groups. They may target luxury cars that can be shipped overseas. And these types of thefts have the lowest recovery rates. Now, arson is the willful or malicious burning or attempt to burn a dwelling, house, public building, motor vehicle, or aircraft, or personal property of another. Anything that's a suspicious fire or the origin is unknown don't get included in these statistics. Most people who are arrested for arson are white men. And there's a wide range of motivations here. It could be thrill-seeking, and arson can also be done for profit or for insurance purposes. Now, most fire setters are juveniles, and when they're younger than 7, it's generally kids who start a fire by accident or out of curiosity. Now, between 8 to 12, it may start out as curiosity, or it could be a sign of an underlying psychosocial conflict. Between 13 and 18, these are usually kids who already have a history of fire setting, and they're often going undetected. Now, in terms of thieves, we have professional criminals, persistent thieves, and occasional offenders. Now, professional criminals commit crime with skill. They bring in a decent amount of money, and they often don't get caught or get incarcerated. Now, persistent thieves continue in property crimes despite the fact that they don't really have better than average success, and they generally don't specialize. And then we have occasional offenders, and their patterns are guided mostly by what opportunities become available to them. Now, in terms of criminal careers for property offenders, there's often a break-in period, and this is about the first 10 to 12 years of a criminal career. You're increasingly committed to this criminal lifestyle and exploring various kinds of crime. Around age 30, you enter a stable period in which you identify most closely with this criminal lifestyle. During this period, rehabilitation is unlikely. And then around age 40 begins the burnout phase, where there's a lower commitment to this criminal lifestyle. Now, some people say that property offenders are rational, right? And rationality is when we are using impersonal, methodical, efficient, logical components to make our decisions. But offenders generally use limited rationality. So there's a little bit of rationality used, but generally people are not taking into account all the factors they should take into account. Now, in terms of types of burglars, we have low-level burglars, primarily kids, generally spur of the moment. They're easily deterred from a target. The rewards from offending are generally not particularly large, and they may desist from burglary as they get older. Middle-range burglars are a little bit older, but they may have begun burgling things as a juvenile. They go back and forth between crime and legitimate activities. They're less discouraged by security devices, and they may be lacking the connections for dealing in stolen goods on any kind of large scale. Then we have high-level burglars. These are professionals who work in organized crews. They earn a good living. Their burglaries are carefully planned. High-level burglars may be known to the police, but their activities are largely concealed from detection. Now, burglars at any level may target both residences and commercial buildings. Nighttime residential and daytime commercial burglaries are the most serious. And burglaries are often treated as a cold crime, not a cold case. Basically, a cold crime means there's little physical evidence to link the offender to the offense. The burglar is often gone before the victim even discovers they've been victimized. Now, retail establishments are much more likely to be burglarized, and there's a few reasons for that. First of all, the merchandise is exposed, so the burglar knows exactly what is in there that's of value and where it's located. It's usually new merchandise that has a high resale value, and they don't have to spend a lot of time searching for the loot. Now, burglars may also use tipsters as sources of information for target selection. These people might pass on intelligence about a good burglary, and in turn they may get a cut of the take. Targets are rarely chosen on spur of the moment, but observation may be fragmented. Other things that play a role in how a target is selected, you're looking for signs of whether or not the building's occupied. Is there alarms? Are there dogs? How far away is this place from your particular residence? Now, the most prevalent rationale for residential burglary is a need for fast cash. This doesn't mean basic necessities of life. Most burglars are committed to, quote, every night is Saturday night lifestyle. Small number of burglars commit burglary for the psychic rewards, the thrill of it. Now, in the 80s, robbery began increasing and burglary decreasing. And this is because of the demand for crack cocaine during this time period. In order to fund drug habits, users found that robbery gets them cash more quickly than a burglary does. Now, when you're working in burglaries and you have stolen property, you need a way to turn that into cash. Receiving stolen property allows for various levels of profit, depending on your skill level. So stolen property has several paths from a thief to a customer. Now, a burglar might commit a crime and steal something that they know somebody wants. They might sell to people known to them or use flea markets or auctions. They might use the internet. They might sell to legitimate retailers claiming the items are legal, or they may use a fence. A fence is a professional reseller. It's an individual or group involved in the buying, selling, and distribution of stolen goods. It's the least common method of disposing of stolen goods, but the most common used by professional thieves. Now, there's also criminal receivers. Professional receivers may be generalists or specialists that might use a legitimate business as a cover for criminal activity. Avocational receivers buy stolen property on a part-time basis, but it might be associated with their primary business. And then amateur receivers are otherwise honest people who buy stolen property on a relatively small scale. And that wraps up this chapter.